And then all of a sudden, 14 pages into this book, one book out of an entire series, Nesta hears that everybody hates her, which she should have realized by now because she's been nothing but heartless, and goes, oh yeah, maybe I should do something about that. Maybe I should do something about that. Like, pardon? Like, at first, this book felt like the author herself liked Nesta and decided that she should get the audience to like Nesta too. So she was like, let me couple together this last book and give Nesta like a redemption arc. Today, we are going to be talking about the book A Court of Silver Flames. Now, this is a first for me because this is the first time I've ever went back and forth from reading the physical book to listening to the audiobook. I would read the physical book when I felt like reading it, and I would listen to the audiobook while I was doing chores or on a walk or exercising. Before we get into a summary of this book, I will say that there are trigger warnings for childbirth and the complications that come with childbirth. So if that is something you are sensitive to, then this is probably not a book you would want to read. And also, there is a lot of talk about males taking advantage of females. So if that is something you are sensitive to as well, this is probably a book you would want to skip. So with that being said, let's get into the summary of this book. So unlike the other books in this series, because this is the final book in A Court of Thorns and Roses series, this book focuses on Nesta, the oldest sister to Feyre, and we see her kind of dealing with and getting over stuff that had happened in her past. So with that being said, let's get into the characters of this book. The characters of this book are Nesta Argion, Feyre's oldest sister, and Castian, Reyes's right-hand man, well, one of them at least, and that's kind of the main two that this story is about. Whereas the rest of the books were about Feyre and her story, this one focuses on Nesta. So let's get into this. So off the bat, we see Nesta kind of having to be set down by Feyre and the rest of Rhysand's little group that he has made, because she, after the war with Hybern, has kind of turned to alcohol and sex as a way to deal with her problems and a way to forget what happened, because she did witness her father be killed right in front of her, and she's traumatized by that. And at first I was like, how are you about to sit here and act like you cared about your dad when all you've talked about is the fact that you were willing to let your sisters starve and didn't help your sisters because you wanted to prove a point that your father wasn't doing enough to provide for you and your sisters, when you very much yourself could have helped your sisters out. But you were a nuisance, and you actively spent the money that your sister earned, and yet you blame her for you guys becoming high fae in the first place, when the only reason she was in the woods in the first place is because you did nothing to help her. And throughout this entire series, she has been nothing but a condescending, hard-headed, selfish bitch. And I'm not sugarcoating it, because that's how she acts. She acts higher than thou, high and mighty, and looks down on her sister and blames her youngest sister for everything, when in reality she could have gotten off her lazy ass and helped her sister out. And so it was very hard for me at first to have any sympathy for Nesta whatsoever, because she has been nothing but a cold-hearted bitch throughout this entire series so far. And the only thing that snaps her out of this, out of the fact that they basically had to put her in rehab because all she was doing the last 2 books was drowning her sorrows in men and alcohol. They literally had to put her in a sky tower that was magically protected, that was 10,000 steps tall, so no one could climb down it, before she straightened up. And the only reason she even straightened up in the first place is because Castian said, you know, everybody hates you, right? Everybody hates you. And then all of a sudden, 14 pages into this book, one book out of an entire series, Nesta hears that everybody hates her, which she should have realized by now because she's been nothing but heartless, and goes, oh yeah, maybe I should do something about that. Maybe I should do something about that. Like, pardon? Like, at first, this book felt like the author herself liked Nesta and decided that she should get the audience to like Nesta too. So she was like, let me couple together this last book and give Nesta like a redemption arc. And I think that's why it's 750 pages. Is because she needed that many pages to make Nesta redeemable in the audience's eyes. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I don't hate Nesta. I get she's going through it, but some of the stuff she says and does throughout this entire series makes it very hard to forgive her for all the previous things. And the whole, oh, even at the end, my father loved me, after her being nothing but hateful towards him, just kind of hits hollow to me. And through Nesta, like, basically going to rehab forcefully in this sky tower, the house ends up, like, being her maid of sorts, like, giving her books or giving her meals and trying to get her to eat. And you have Castian, who is kind of her, like, babysitter, and she is still kind of rude to him the entire time. She refuses to train like he tells her to, which is kind of part of her punishment and a way for her to get the rage out and deal with her issues, because exercise is a good way for your body to get out those pent-up emotions and that pent-up rage and just clear your mind enough to where you know how to work through what you're going through. I feel like that's why when some of us are emotional and we're stuck in our emotions, we feel like we can't sit still. And that's exactly what Castian was trying to do for Nesta, is like, get up, move, get off your butt and do something about what you're feeling. Try to do something, because if you just stay in this place, it's not going to help you. So finally, after hearing that everybody hates her, Nesta decides to snap to things and do something about it. And we see her kind of start to grow closer to Castian, because he always is there because he's like her babysitter, and she can't really go anywhere because the house is magically protected, so they can't teleport out. They call it willowing, but I'm just going to call it teleporting because it's easier to remember. And they can't climb 10,000 steps even as a high fae. That's a lot of steps. So she's essentially trapped there, so it kind of becomes like a Stockholm Syndrome sort of love, and Castian kind of just lets it happen. And another thing that bugged me about this book is the sex scenes, because they seemed so out of place. Like, there was a moment where Nesta finds out that Feyre could die during childbirth because she is with child, but because the child has wings like Raysan does, her body is not equipped to like let the wings pass out of her system, so it could lead to both her and the baby dying. Well, Nesta finds this out, right? You would think she'd be like, oh my gosh, devastated, but no, she starts screwing Castian right there on the table right after hearing the news, and I'm like, this is not sexy, this is not the time for this, what are we doing here? And there were so many scenes like that where they would come out of nowhere and just feel so out of place, where it was not romantic or even slightly like catching my attention. It got to a point where the scenes just got annoying, and the whole time I'm sat there thinking, Castian, she's been nothing but a bitch to you through all of these books until chapter 14 of this one. And you're gonna tell me you're just gonna brush that off just to get in her pants? Huh? What? No, honey. And this whole mate thing is such BS. Like, they use the excuse that they're mates and neither one of them wanted to admit it, mainly Nesta. But, like, come on, that's so cheap. That is so cheap. That's so cheap. That's so cheap. I get that they're not humans, but that is still so cheap. And, like, and on top of all of that, apparently that wasn't enough. We find out that the queen, who was previously thrown into the cauldron like Nesta and her sister was, is out for revenge. So she's looking for what is known as the Dread Troves, which is a mask, a harp, and another item that was magically created. It's a magic artifact. And through having to search for these artifacts, it is found out that Nesta has the power to make magic artifacts where no one else does. And it's found out that Nesta has power over death itself. And it's like, oh, not only is she a bitch, but she has power to destroy literally everyone with the snap of her finger. That sounds like a great idea. And granted, it works out. It does work out, but I'm just like, ugh. Once again, this book felt like the author herself fell in love with the character of Nesta and decided to give one book to try and redeem Nesta. And there were parts of it where it felt rushed. Like, I did like her connection to the librarians in the library, because she was assigned to work there if she wasn't training. That didn't feel rushed, but like everything with Castian, the whole her feeling bad for what happened to her dad after 4 or 5 books of her hating him because he sent them in poverty, it just felt like the author loved Nesta and was trying to get the audience to like her despite everything she had done in the previous books and her behavior in the previous books. And for that reason, it kind of knocked it to a 3 out of 5 stars for me, because I don't hate Nesta, but I would have liked to see her gradually grow as a better person, not just have it crammed in one book that felt tacked on. But I liked the book overall. I liked seeing the librarian ladies become their own people and not be so afraid anymore. I liked seeing Feyre and Raysan put their foot down and basically put Nesta into rehab and say, no, we care about you. I know you're gonna hate us for this, but we care about you, so we're doing this for you. And there were so many other things that I liked about the book. And I think Castian is a sweetheart. But the whole using the mate thing as an excuse for Castian to get in Nesta's pants doesn't sit well with me, because she has been nothing but rude and nasty and mean to him this entire series. I feel like that was cheaped out. But overall, I liked this book. And I feel glad that Nesta's powers came to a head, and she did something really brave in the end of the book, but I'm not going to say what that is because I don't want to spoil that. Overall, if you want to read this book and you like this book, that's fine. I don't mind. I did enjoy this book. I just didn't enjoy it as much as the others. Plus, I was reading this series for Raysan and for Feyre, not for Nesta and Castian. So it felt like a very different book. So for those ends, that's my thoughts on A Court of Silver Flame. My battery's about to die even though I just charged it. Gotta love that. So I'm gonna see you next time. Bye guys!